The year is 1939. The world stands on the edge of a knife. Across Europe, whispers of war grow louder, soldiers march, flags rise, and speeches promise glory and revenge. No one knows it yet, but humanity is about to enter 6 years of fire. This is how the Second World War began. Just 20 years earlier, the First World War had ended with millions dead and empires shattered. Germany, blamed and broken by the Treaty of Versailles, was forced to pay crushing reparations and surrender its pride. Out of that bitterness, a voice began to rise, a man who promised to restore honor and rebuild a nation. His name was Adolf Hitler. In the 1930s, Germany sank into economic chaos. People were hungry, angry, and ready to believe. Hitler's Nazi party offered simple answers: unity, strength, and vengeance. By 1933 he had become chancellor, soon after, dictator. He rebuilt the army, defied the treaty, and watched as the world stayed silent. First he reoccupied the Rhineland, then took Austria, then carved up Czechoslovakia. Britain and France, haunted by memories of the last war, hoped appeasement would preserve peace. They were wrong. In August 1939, Germany signed a shocking deal with its sworn enemy, the Soviet Union, the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact. To the public it was a peace treaty, in secret it was a plan to divide Eastern Europe. Poland would be split in two. And at dawn on September 1, 1939, Hitler struck. German tanks thundered across the Polish border, dive bombers screamed from the sky, and cities burned beneath the Blitzkrieg, the lightning war. The Polish army fought bravely but was outmatched by steel and fire. 2 days later, Britain and France declared war on Germany, yet their words came too late. By month's end, Poland was gone, conquered from west and east as Soviet troops moved in to seize their share. Across Europe, church bells rang not for joy but for warning. A second Great War had begun. But after Poland fell, the front went quiet. Through the long winter of 1939–40, soldiers stared across borders without fighting. Newspapers called it the phony war. Still, in the factories of Germany, engines roared and weapons poured off assembly lines. Hitler was planning his next strike, against the West. In Britain, children were evacuated, gas masks handed out, and the world held its breath. No one imagined how far the flames would spread, to France, to Russia, to the Pacific, to every corner of the earth. The match had been struck, the fire was spreading. It all began with one invasion, one man's ambition, and one world's hesitation. By the time it ended, more than 70 million lives would be lost. But that is still ahead. Next time, we witness how Germany's war machine rolled across Europe, and how the first sparks of resistance began to rise. This was only the beginning. The winter of 1939 turned to spring, and Europe waited in silence. The guns were quiet, the skies calm, yet everyone knew the storm was coming. Newspapers called it the phony war, but for millions of soldiers sitting in trenches from France to Germany, it was a calm before catastrophe. In Berlin, Adolf Hitler was already planning his next move. His goal was simple: to crush Western Europe before Britain and France could react. In April 1940, the silence shattered. Without warning, Germany struck north. In just weeks, Denmark surrendered, and Norway fell after fierce fighting in snow-covered mountains. It was Blitzkrieg again, lightning war. Fast, coordinated attacks by tanks, aircraft, and mechanized troops. The world watched, stunned, as Hitler's armies swept aside everything in their path. But this was only the beginning. On May 10, 1940, Germany launched its invasion of France, the heart of Western Europe. Instead of attacking head-on through the heavily fortified Maginot Line, the Germans did something unexpected. They went through the Ardennes forest, a region the Allies thought was impossible for tanks. But Hitler's generals proved otherwise. Within days, German panzers broke through and poured into France. Entire French divisions were cut off. The British Expeditionary Force, sent to help, was surrounded in the north. Panic spread. Refugees filled the roads, French cities were bombed from the air. Late May, British and French troops were trapped near the port of Dunkirk. Defeat seemed certain. Yet from this disaster came a miracle. Over 9 days, the Royal Navy and hundreds of small civilian boats, fishing vessels, ferries, even private yachts, crossed the English Channel under fire and rescued more than 330,000 soldiers. It was one of the most daring evacuations in history. Winston Churchill, the new British Prime Minister, called it a miracle of deliverance. But he warned his people, wars are not won by evacuations. France still stood, but only barely. In June 1940, German forces entered Paris without resistance. The French government surrendered. In just 6 weeks, one of the strongest armies in Europe had fallen. The Nazi flag flew over the Eiffel Tower. Hitler had achieved what Germany failed to do in the First World War. He had conquered France. Only one nation now stood between him and total domination of Western Europe, Great Britain. The British people braced themselves for invasion. Across the Channel, German forces prepared Operation Sea Lion, the plan to invade the British Isles. But first, the Luftwaffe, Germany's powerful air force, had to destroy Britain's Royal Air Force. And so began the Battle of Britain, the first major campaign fought entirely in the air. All through the summer of 1940, the skies above England roared with the sound of engines. German bombers targeted airfields, radar stations, and cities. The RAF was outnumbered, yet its pilots, many barely out of their teens, fought with courage and skill. Flying Spitfires and Hurricanes, they defended their homeland in desperate dogfights over the countryside and the Channel. Radar, a new invention, gave the British an unseen advantage. They could spot incoming raids and intercept them before they struck. Then came the Blitz. When the Luftwaffe failed to break the RAF, Hitler changed tactics. London and other cities were bombed night after night. Entire neighborhoods were reduced to rubble. Civilians slept in subway tunnels as air raid sirens wailed above. But the British spirit refused to break. Churchill's words echoed across the nation: "We shall fight on the beaches, we shall never surrender." By October 1940, the Luftwaffe had lost more planes than it could replace. The invasion was postponed, then cancelled. For the first time, Hitler's war machine had been stopped. The skies over Britain belonged to the RAF. The world took notice. Nazi Germany could be resisted. The cost was heavy, tens of thousands of civilians dead, cities in ruins, but Britain stood unbroken. Across the ocean, America watched, not yet part of the war but slowly preparing. In Berlin, Hitler turned his gaze eastward, toward the vast lands of the Soviet Union. But that would come later. For now, Europe burned, France was occupied, and Britain, alone, stood in defiance. As Churchill later said, "Never in the field of human conflict was so much owed by so many to so few." The few were the fighter pilots of the Battle of Britain, whose courage saved a nation, and perhaps, the world. Music swells, fading into the sound of distant aircraft and wind. This was 1940, the year of lightning conquest and the year of defiance. The year when Europe fell and Britain refused to kneel. But the war was far from over. In the next chapter, the flames of battle would spread to the deserts of Africa, the frozen seas of the Atlantic, and finally, to the gates of the Soviet Union. The world was entering its darkest hour.